Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Town of Yucca Valley meeting of Tuesday, March 2nd. It is 6 o'clock. We'll start off with our roll call.
Council members Dennison.
Here.
Droz.
Here.
Lombardo.
Here.
Schooler.
Here.
And Mayor Abel.
Here. All right, we're going to have our Pledge of Allegiance and also our invocation. Tonight's invocation is Pastor Wayne Morrow from Desert Hills Presbyterian Church. And I'm going to have our council member Droz introduce who's leading the pledge tonight.
All right, thank you very much. We have Mr. Joseph Candelaria online, and he will be saying the Pledge of Allegiance with us. He will be starting it. And he is the Vice President of the Student Government at Copper Mountain College, ASCMC. And he's also the representative for the state, Region 9, for Copper Mountain College. And I do want to say he's a non-traditional student because he wanted to be a musician, and a little bit later in life, instead of in his teens, he decided to go to Copper Mountain College, and now he's on the student government. So Joseph, would you like to start us with the Pledge of Allegiance?
I'll stand. Sure. Hello, I'm Joseph Candelaria. Before we start the Pledge of Allegiance, I just wanted to say that thank you guys for having me. I'm honored to do this, and that as we say these words together, we think about the founding principles that America was founded upon, that we are a country, give us your weak, give us your poor, give us your tired. And yeah, so I will begin. Put my hand over my heart. Do I stand? I guess there we go. I'll stand up. There we go.
United States of America.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Joseph.
Pastor Morrow, thank you for joining us online as well.
Yes, let us pray. Dear God, we're so grateful for this town. We're grateful for all the activity we see with our utilities being worked on, and our roads and our sewers. So we're grateful for the progress. We're grateful for the caregivers. We're grateful for the protectors, for the teachers, for the mentors, for the college students. We're so grateful to live in this town, and we give you thanks. Lord, we are sorry if we ever fall short of being the good neighbor on our street, or in our work, or in our school. And Lord, we ask that you would strengthen us to be a better citizen in the future. And Lord, today we pray for those that are most vulnerable, for those that are hungry, for those that are cold. We pray for those without proper shelter. We lift up those seeking a better education. And we particularly in this time think of those sick, especially those sick with COVID and those treating them. And we ask that you would give them endurance and health, and help us to fight the good fight and come through this COVID-19 disease. And we just give you thanks and ask for your help. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate that. We're going to start off with a very special presentation. We have Dr. Darren Otten, who is serving as our superintendent and president at Copper Mountain College since July of 2019. The president has previously served in education as the vice president of instruction and student services and the dean of applied academics and workforce development at Yucca College. Before attending Yucca College, he was a faculty and vice chair, Department of Mechanical Engineering at Cal State University, Chico for 11 years. My dad coached at Sacramento State, so I apologize. His educational career has spanned responsibilities for traditional CTE programs and so forth, which are actually some of the programs that are now available at Copper Mountain College. In addition to the higher education experience, he's made significant private sector executive and technical experience in engineering and worked for small startups all the way up to Fortune 500s. And now, from the Chicago Bulls, Dr. Otten, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you all. I truly appreciate the opportunity to provide a brief update about what's going on at Copper Mountain, and I apologize for the bio, that was extensive for what we're talking about here. It is truly an amazing opportunity anytime I get a chance to talk about what's going on at the college. I couldn't be more proud to be part of the institution and ultimately our students. And this evening you got to see one of our students, Joseph Candelaria, who not only obviously represents Copper Mountain College as Councilmember Droz noted, he also represents students across the state up in Sacramento. And that is something that I have to say, just recently I was on a statewide call, and there Joseph was representing the smallest institution in the entire state on that level. And that is something that we all should be very proud of as we kind of navigate the future. And that's really what I'm here to talk about today, is a little bit about where we are, what we're doing, and where we're going. And this last year, and as it was noted, I've been on this gig now about 18 months. And whether you look at that in dog years or whether you look at that in the fastest 18 months I've ever seen, I don't know, because it's a blur, and it's the longest period we've all lived at the same time. So I'm still getting my bearings, and that's something that is really just kind of surreal to me when we look at the fact that I've been here for that time, but I still feel brand new to the neighborhood. So, a couple of things I want to provide you all some updates on. First and foremost, Copper Mountain College does continue to maintain good standing with ACCJC, which is our accrediting body. Recently, you may have seen some newspaper articles where there were some findings, and there are some findings that we are continuing to work on. These are continuing processes that go back to the original visit. I am comfortable that we have all the things that will be in place needed to meet our accreditation requirements on an ongoing basis for the college. Currently, for the spring semester, we are primarily online. However, there are in-person activities that are currently going on. So, for example, we have in-person healthcare, nursing, EMT, fire technology, auto technology, in person, laboratories that were difficult to convert. Starting in the middle of this month, we're actually going to be coming back with some of our in-person laboratories around the sciences that are also difficult to convert. I do have to say, going back to now a year ago, which, think about that for a second, March 14th through the 17th, somewhere in that window was when the world stopped, right? Copper Mountain College managed to pivot all of our courses online last fall. Now, was it perfect? No. Did we learn a whole lot? Yes. Are there things we're ultimately going to take away from this experience with the pandemic that are going to help us? Yes. Have there been some things that we've identified that are significant challenges, I think, not only for Copper Mountain College students, our community, but students in general? Absolutely. And I'll brief you a little bit on that in a second. But for spring 2021, we are primarily online with the exception of some of the instructional modalities for laboratories. Our summer session is going to be, again, fully online. In the fall, we are going to be closer to what looks like the traditional mix of on-ground and online education that's typically there. Our intent at this point is that about 30% of our schedule, perhaps as much as 40% of our schedule, will be online in the fall, with the balance being in a traditional modality. That's best case scenario. Right? We are all prepared, and the one thing we've all learned in the last year is flexibility and the ability to pivot if needed. And so right now, given what we know, given the guidelines and the guidance that we currently have from the state chancellors, CDC, everything that we're all dealing with, that is the intent for right now. COVID-19 has been a definite challenge for all of us. We couldn't be prouder of the partnership with the county and the vaccine center that's currently going on, the testing center that was there for a significant amount of time. At this point, educators, those in education, have become eligible for vaccinations. And we do, at this point, expect that all of our employees will have an opportunity to be fully vaccinated should they want to within the coming weeks. And so that's something that I think we're really excited about as we look forward. MUSD has also been doing the same thing with their employees and looking back towards, what the future kind of holds. I expect that vaccine center will probably live through midsummer at this point, if I had to guess. I will say that most of the nurses over there that are administering the vaccines are traveling nurses. Some of them are local. I had the pleasure of getting a needle jabbed in my arm by actually a VN graduate and a current RN student at Copper Mountain who I think enjoyed it a little too much to stab the president. But it was definitely something that I found memorable, and I'm sure she did too. So in any case, that's the kind of the update on COVID-19. Enrollment at the college, as well as enrollment in the state of California community colleges, is down right now. We're down about 11% on head count, and we are down currently about 17–18% on total enrollment. And what the difference is obviously head count is individual head counts, total enrollment is the number of units that an individual student would take. Now, Copper Mountain College is currently operating in a hold harmless environment, so from a financial standpoint, it's not an immediate cliff, but it definitely is something we're very concerned about long term. We are making an ongoing push with our late start courses. We're making an ongoing push with trying to make sure that students understand the opportunity to essentially go to school free. If you graduate Morongo Unified and you want to come to Copper Mountain College in the fall, the Promise program essentially will cover your tuition costs to come to school in the fall. If I ask one thing that comes out of today, take that home to your friends, your neighbors, your kids, your grandkids, anybody that might be looking at school. Cost should not be the barrier for anybody to go to school. We are not different, though, than the state. Normally, when there's an economic decline, enrollments run counter-cyclical, and you see community college enrollments go up as people, frankly, are looking to be retrained, reskilled, go to work. The unknown and the challenges with COVID has really created a situation where folks are more worried about feeding themselves and their family in the coming weeks and months, and don't have that ability to even step back to say, okay, I'm unemployed for 6 months. They're waiting for the phone call that says, hey, you can come back to work because the restaurant's reopened. And so those are the challenges that I think we're seeing right now and that are impacting our enrollment. 2021 represents the start of a new, 2021-22 represents the start of a new educational master plan opportunity. We're currently developing our EMP that will guide us for the next 5 years. Many of you may have seen the survey that was pushed out from our institution. I'm thrilled to say when we did that about a month ago, we got over 280 responses from community members who responded to our survey to help us inform our educational master plan. That's really exciting because what that tells us is that this community is invested in what we're doing out there, and we really appreciate that feedback. So more to come specifically around the educational master plan and some of the things that are all feeding into that as we look to make our institution better for the future. And really what that looks like as well is that for most of you in this room, you probably know this, but Copper Mountain College is 20 years old. 2001 was when it became an independent school from College of the Desert. And with the college foundation, we are starting our celebration of that 20 years. Because if you think about what that college and how that college was founded, how it began, it was the work of the community. It's truly the only community college in this system that really puts community in the community college name. And we are working to honor that legacy. So for each one of the next coming 20 months, we're honoring individuals who were founders, patrons, those people who helped build that college over that last 20 years. Starting at that particular, after that, we'll be adding probably one more individual or group or family, whatever it is, on an annual basis to really recognize the value that this community has for this college. And I have to say, for me, that's the greatest thing I can ask for working at an institution. As we look towards the future, and you'll see the tagline down here, honor the legacy, change the future, create tomorrow. And that's what we're looking at as we frame the next 20 years. We've been here 20. What do the next 20 look like? And that's really an exciting proposition when you're looking at all the things and all the changes that are going on in the world right now. Education is a 120, 130-year-old business model. The first disruptor that we have truly seen in education has been COVID-19. You've seen some things around the fringes of education, but this truly has given us an opportunity to look at education in a way that I think will impact it for the future. Part of that future planning and what we look to do You'll see some exciting things about some alternative energy projects and expansion out there at the college. You're going to see us looking at how do we serve our community and how are we aligning our programs for the local employers and where our community expects our students to have educational opportunities. Because the thing that we've learned from COVID is that they all have more options than they ever had before, and people have become comfortable in a different learning modality. You might live in Yucca Valley, you might live in Joshua Tree, you might live in 29. You no longer have just Copper Mountain to choose from. You can go anywhere. So our value proposition has to be very strong about how we align with work, how we align with transfer, how we align with community. That is ultimately where we have to go as an institution. A couple of just quick updates on some exciting things going on. Out at 29, most of you are aware that there's a Project Phoenix going on. We've got a joint culinary project going on there that will ultimately lead through a transfer degree. MUSD has dual enrolled courses, both at Yucca Valley as well as ultimately out in 29, that will plug into our program for a certification that ultimately can transfer down to CSUSB in their hospitality program. Starting on April 5th, I believe it's April 5th, if I recall the date right, our Wildland Firefighter Academy is kicking off, which is a short-term certificate that will put wildland firefighters on the front line in California by mid-June in externships. What we've learned about firefighting and the fire season in California, it's now year-round. And so the opportunities are pretty exciting around that particular project as we go forward. Just today, I shared with the city manager here, as well as several municipality leaders within the region, the latest workforce assessment program, and I didn't come here or a workforce assessment document for the college. I didn't come here to specifically talk about that, but I will gladly come back if there are questions. But that really looks at where the future of the jobs are in the next 4 or 5 years. But you'll see that some of the things that we're talking about right here, in particular in government service and in some of the hospitality areas, are continuing opportunities. Finally, as we talk about what the future of education looks like, I indicated that COVID has dramatically changed the expectations of our students, the expectations of our employees, and how we ultimately navigate high-quality education in a safe environment that meets those expectations of everybody who's involved, I think is our biggest challenge. On top of that, for everybody who's ever spent much time in a college environment, there's a sense of community or connectedness you feel to the institution. You become one. At Copper Mountain, you become a fighting cacti. But with everybody being remote, that stickiness, that connectedness is something that's very difficult to foster that sense of remote or online community. As we look towards the fall, this is our biggest priority, is to reconnect our students, our staff, to each other and to our institution. We're looking at ways that we may be able to do that through recreational opportunities that may include things like rock walls within our Bell Center, but also, how do we build that sense of community? And I implore all of you to think about that, because I think all of us who've been operating in this virtual world need to start thinking about how do we reconnect the people. For us, that's the critical item, I think, for education. And so I look for people's help as we do that. We all know that Copper Mountain College, the workplace is going to look different. There's an expectation of some remote working, which I think is a positive thing for us who are space challenged out there. We can hot bunk offices, and I'll tell you what, that starts to look pretty good from the standpoint of space utilization. So there's some huge opportunities that come out of this. I think the access that comes out of it, huge. Biggest challenge that we've got when we come to the future of education, though. In this community, as you move towards Wonder Valley, as you move, frankly, anywhere a couple of miles off the 62 corridor, high-speed infrastructure doesn't exist. And that is an equity issue for our students. That is an equity issue for our students, and that is an economic issue for our community. One of the things that I ask for help with as we look forward to opportunities to navigate things in Sacramento influence policy is specifically working on advocating for high-speed internet within our communities, because that is something we've got to solve, because if we don't solve that, it will continue to impact the pocketbooks of our community and impact the opportunities for our students to be educated. So that's really what I have to say today, and I can't tell you, I'm more than happy to take any questions, but I'm thrilled to be here. I love talking about the place. I'm excited about the stuff that's going on out there. We got cool stuff happening. So, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, President Otten. We're going to open it up for any public comments, and then we'll maybe have a few questions. So, anyone in the public would like to make a comment on the presentation tonight? All right.
Left him spellbound.
And hearing and seeing none from the online community as well, we'll bring it back to the council. Council comments, questions?
I'm not supposed to ask questions, but I'm under directions from my wife.
We see how that went.
I'm glad you noticed. Do you see Copper Mountain College having an opportunity with things like drones, robotics, 3D printing in the future of these career technical areas?
So one of the things that's unique about the California Community College structure, as well as the opportunities, is that I think that there are opportunities for the college to explore workforce-aligned programs for anything that we can show significant demand. Now, that's the issue, is that you have to make sure that we can connect it to actual employment. And so while there are some peripheral opportunities that have shown up around things like drones right now, and there is a growing marketplace for that, on a regional basis, there hasn't been significant infrastructure investments specifically in either ag, military industrial, or other regionally yet. But the bottom line is, if there is a need, we do have opportunities to lead around serving the workforce development.
You said that you just attended a conference on future workforce needs. Can you elaborate a little bit briefly for us?
Well, so one of the biggest challenges on identifying what the future workforce looks like is no one knows exactly what the specific technologies are. Sure. Most of the time you see the conversations relying back to expected skill sets and growth mindset kind of discussions around how do people take skills that they learn over here and apply them to the new world that they're now experiencing. So what I do have to say on that is that I think in the big picture, and this even comes back to our accreditation conversation at the beginning, gives us an opportunity to really look at, do the alignment of our institutional learning outcomes, meaning whatever degree you came from, does that ultimately provide you the flexibility, the critical thinking skills, the public speaking skills, the communication skills, whatever those kind of general thinking, applied educational tools are to whatever field is there. So yes, I dodged your question because no, I don't know exactly what's going to be the technology of tomorrow, but I can tell you that ultimately, as we look at servicing the local employers, we'll make sure that the programs are aligned.
And part of your drive with the college is to make sure that you're teaching those critical thinking and those abilities to integrate other technologies into a project or
I think the only thing that we can say is that we know that change is constant, right?
Yeah.
That's the only thing we know about the future. And so that ultimately those, I don't want to call them soft skills because I don't think they're necessarily soft skills, and that undermines the idea of things like critical thinking because that's not a soft skill, but it should be an expectation of any college graduate.
Great. All right, thank you. I'm excited for the future.
So am I.
Well, you're well known for the quality of students that you produce with the nursing program and with the fire academy now. So, yeah, seeing the expanded programs, and as you know, there's a lot of need in the trades and so forth. My mother used to work for LA Trade Tech as an administrator there, and they had a lot of wonderful programming there that helped people find employment right from the community college right into the workforce. So you bring that expertise, and I'm sure that's one of the many reasons why you were hired for this particular college as well. So we thank you for that. Any other questions? All right.
Thank
Seeing
you very
none,
much.
thank
for the
you
time
again for
tonight.
being
I
here.
really appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
Wonderful, thank you. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda. I would ask the council to consider, with legal counsel's approval, that we add an additional public comment section, that be added before the the department reports tonight. So we're not eliminating the one at the end of the meeting because somebody might arrive late thinking they could come and speak. I'd like to add an additional public comment section here before the department reports. Is that fine, legal counsel?
Sure, yeah, not a problem.
Do we have consensus with that?
I agree.
Can I get a
I'll
motion
move.
for that?
I'll move approval of the agenda with that addition.
I'll second. Always good to hear from the public.
Motion is second.
Councilmembers Dennison,
Yes.
Droz,
Yes.
Lombardo,
Yes.
Schooler,
Yes.
and Mayor Abel.
Yes. We'll move on to the consent agenda. All items listed on the consent agenda are routine matters or formal documents covering previous town council instruction. Items are enacted by one motion and a second without separate discussion unless a member of the town council or the public or staff, a member of the town council or staff requests dialogue on a specific item at the beginning of the meeting. Requests to have public comment or speak on this matter of the consent agenda should have been filed with the town clerk. Do we have anyone wishing to comment on just the consent agenda calendar? And we've received no notice. Okay, we do have a comment on consent agenda.
Is it online?
Joseph, did you have a comment about tonight's consent agenda?
I misunderstood. No, I don't. I had a comment on the last thing, but never mind.
Oh, I'm so sorry, and the president is not here, but thank you for attending tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Hearing and seeing none, we'll bring it back to the council for approval of the consent agenda. Anyone wishing to pull an item?
No.
Or make a motion?
I'll move to approve the consent.
Second?
Second. Oh, go ahead.
Councilmember Schooler seconded.
Councilmembers Dennison,
Yes.
Droz,
Yes.
Lombardo,
Yes.
Schooler,
Yes.
and Mayor Abel.
Yes. We'll move to public comments. The town council takes this time to consider your comments on items that are not on the agenda. When you're called to speak, please state your name, community of residence. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes or less. Inappropriate behavior which disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of the meeting will result in forfeiture of your public comment privileges. The town council is prohibited by state law from taking actions or discussing items not on the printed agenda. Madam Clerk, do we have someone wishing to speak?
I believe, Mr. Flint, you would like to speak for public comment? And then Tyler, you follow? Thank you.
Thank you. My neighbor to the west, name is Bozina Dan, who's 94 years old. She recently had a knee replacement. At her age would surprise me, and is now in a rehab facility healing because they're afraid she's going to be falling down till her knee gets completely healed. Her husband died several years ago, and we help her as much as we can, yard work, other chores, occasionally groceries, things like that. Last week I was doing the weekly watering of all her plants, which are many, and noted that her sewer pipe hookup, where it will go, from the septic tank, which is marked, to where the visible depression is, where the stub out pipe is, goes straight between two small Joshua trees, within a couple of feet. And the pipe direction was determined a year and a half ago when they put the street pipe in long before the Joshua Tree new rules came out. And I do not know for sure, but from knowing her husband and her, as we visited over the years, she's probably living on her late husband's retirement. He was an engine mechanic in the Air Force for many years. And with the major cost of the sewer, then the cost of the hookup, then the monthly operation fees, which will go on forever, after the hookup, I know she's going to have a hard time paying all the additional arborist inspections and whatever requirements that he comes up with. It bothers me every time I have to say something about this. Bozina was born in Poland and was taken prisoner in her teens by the Nazis and made a slave laborer. She's one of not too many that have survived. And this is one of the reasons we'll do almost anything to help her. And as with many of your other residents, she's going to have a hard time paying for all these things. So I hope that the council and the staff is working on something for us, because it really is important to your people. So thank you very much for your consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Flint. Appreciate it.
Tyler, folks? And we have our online request with Dr. Deborah Savitt. You'll be following next.
Good afternoon, Town Council, staff, and Mayor. My name is Tyler Folks, and I serve on the Revenue Measure Oversight Commission. I am also a member of the Town of Yucca Valley, a resident. I'm coming to you today with the proposition of a new town program. And to provide some context into the program and why I kind of am coming to the town with this initiative, it has to come with the dissatisfaction that I have witnessed both on a federal level and on a local level with the federal government and the VA's administration of our veterans. And so I guess the best way the program could be titled, perhaps, would be a Combat Veterans Health and Wellness Program. And the way the program could be set up, of course it could be subject to change based upon the town's interest, is something to the tune of serving our veterans who have been most impacted by their service. So that could be our Purple Heart veterans, or those who have perhaps been clinically diagnosed with PTSD, and they would have to be members of the town of Yucca Valley. They'd have to be residents here. And so what the program could include is some sort of a stipend or a reimbursement, perhaps, or a subsidy of their participation or membership in some sort of a physical health and wellness center that is here locally within the town. So that could be a subsidy up to a certain dollar amount for their participation in a local gym that is not corporately owned, or it could be their participation in a physical rehabilitation place that is here within the town's jurisdiction, or perhaps the town could even evaluate the potential of exploring some of the psychiatric participations for a health and wellness program. So again, the interest in such a program comes about from our town's proximity to the combat center out in 29 Palms. I think our jurisdiction, given our residents' demographics, this sort of a program might speak more closely to our residents. And while in many instances people's dissatisfaction is appropriately expressed towards the federal government, I do believe we could be the change that we want to see across the nation. And if, for instance, the town were to create such a program, let's say that had a cap of $250 per participant, and there was any concerns regarding a program becoming excessively expensive, you could cap it at 100 participants. That would be $25,000. And again, such a program could be limited to those who are the most greatly impacted. So just to go over, again, some of the possibilities, it would have to be a town resident. They would have to be perhaps a Purple Heart veteran or have a clinical diagnosis of PTSD. And now I understand quite appropriately when people hear about expenditures coming from local government or from any form of government, there is a knee-jerk reaction in opposition, and rightfully so. I definitely appreciate the town council and the city's management of our funds. The town has $11 million budget, which is which is operated quite slim considering the amount of residents that we have. So I really appreciate the management you guys have put forward. Putting this program into context of other town programs and initiatives we've already done, we have budgeted over $100,000 for nonprofit organizations here locally. We've also have spent money on business grant programs in response to COVID relief. So essentially what this program could do is cover the expenditures with spending money on actual residents within the town who essentially signed a social contract with our entire nation to protect us. So we have some individuals of which have had high costs that they've experienced personally that would come to a minimal cost from the town.
Thank you very much. Your time's expired, but if you can put something in writing, please make sure our staff gets that so we can consider or have some further dialogue.
Sure, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. And we have anyone online here?
Deborah Sabat?
Oh, okay, wonderful.
Hello, everybody. How are you this evening? I hope well. I wanted to bring something new this evening that I have thought about for quite some time since I've moved up to Yucca Valley. It's been almost 4 years. And I actually spent time going back to 6 months or 8 months of your meetings. And it really kind of hits at home with me because I'm a chaplain for hospice. And I'm also a resident of Yucca Valley. So I do enjoy the prayers of the pastors that come in, and I want to say thank you to all of them for doing that, and I think that's wonderful. But what I'd like to see myself personally is more religious, cultural diversity in the prayers. So has the town council thought about bringing in, like some of the Buddhist monks? We have some of them out in Landers. I'm sure they'd love to come. I can't really speak for them, but I bet we could get them to come and do prayers. We have the Yucca Valley Center for Spiritual Living. We have the Catholic Church. I haven't seen, now I could be wrong, but I haven't seen any of those churches or different religious, churches or temples being asked. How about Jewish rabbi? That would be really nice to see because it brings religious and cultural diversity to our town and town council meetings. And I think that's important because it shows an example to accept that and bring that in. So can we make that a possibility? I'd be happy to assist with that as well. I'd be happy to make phone calls and have people of different cultural and religious diversities come in and do the opening prayers. Would you think about that? That would be great.
Thank you so very much.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate it. I do know we have a limitation as far as geographic. It has to be within the town limits, but I think we have a policy and maybe the town manager can cover that real quickly.
Certainly, I think the best approach would be to have Ms. Savick get in touch with our town clerk, and our town clerk can explain the existing policy that is intended to encourage as many participants as possible into our opening ceremonies. So I'll have Leslie reach out to Ms. Savick and go through that process, maybe explain it a little bit better, and there may be an opportunity for some partnership there.
Very good. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anyone else online or here in the room that would like to make a public comment? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back to our town council meeting department reports, item number 5.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. If I could have the PowerPoint presentation load. I will be beginning the presentation for the CDBG CV project review and ratification of the town's application for the project. There we go. Okay, so the CDBG CV program was initiated through the CARES Act in May of 2020, and the town received an initial funding allocation in May for our $100,000. The projects were specific to COVID-related activities, and you can see a list there of the eligible activities. They align with what CDBG normally is allowable, such as public service activities, public improvements, economic developments. The focus for CDBG is usually low to moderate income areas and benefiting those residents. So as you can see here, the original CDBG CV1 project allocation was $100,000. the town council approved a project application for the senior center and community center kitchen improvements. The project requirements were due to the FSA meal program, which has increased due to COVID-19. And with that, some of the kitchen equipment has been exceeded capacity, and as you'll see here, has been around for quite a while. And so the project was to improve those items. The new allocation is for the round 3, which was allocating $90,000 to the town. The application was submitted in January for that full $90,000, and so one of the recommendations for you this evening is to approve that application. So I'll click through some photos here, and I believe Curtis will chime in. I'm not as familiar with the facilities, so he'll be able to provide you some insight. But I believe this is the senior center kitchen.
Jordan told me this afternoon that she hasn't even been into our senior center kitchen yet, so I'd be happy to comment on some of these pictures. So, every once in a while we have these opportunities that come before us that normally, oftentimes, we're either trying to plan our maintenance or sometimes it is even reactive where we have to fix something after it breaks. But occasionally we have times where funding is made available where we can be proactive and we can improve some of the infrastructure that we have. This is one of those times through the federal government's CARES Act funding. Incidentally, this funding is from round 1, which was approved all the way back in April, May of 2020. So those funds, many of those funds still haven't been spent. These early pictures here are from the senior center. You can see the range there, the double ovens. Some of the equipment is still fine and will not need to be replaced. Others will. I think we would start by highlighting this beautiful piece of equipment. I wish we had a picture. I don't think we have one of the inside. It's a combination unit, refrigerator, freezer, both. And the limitations on space were made readily apparent earlier this year when FSA began to consolidate their meal preparation for the whole week at a time. Got into a point where they didn't even have enough capacity to be able to freeze the food that they were using and had to use additional facilities outside of the town complex. So I think they were using for a while. Some of the other restaurants in town made their facilities available for use as well. So this is something that's dated. We run into maintenance issues. We may be able to use some of the additional space that's there, consolidate the standalones. So sounds like a lot of money, $190,000, but anytime that you get into these built custom refrigerators, freezers, they add up pretty quickly. So moving on to the way that the grant application is written, it encompasses both the senior center as well as the community center. We've had some conversation with our public health folks at the county level to identify and understand what we could do here behind the wall in terms of limitations for what type of kitchen, whether it's a commercial kitchen, warming kitchen, et cetera. We do have some significant limitations unless we kind of take it to the next level, but there are certainly things that we can do with the funding that's available. You can see some of the equipment that we have there is just really not much more than just residential equipment. So this will give us an opportunity to make some of those changes in a way that will take advantage of the federal funding.
So the recommended action for you this evening is to allocate the entire town's fiscal year 2020 through 2022 CDBG CV3 allocation for the senior center, community center kitchen improvements, and then ratify the staff's submission of the application to San Bernardino County, which was submitted on January 28th. Please let me know if you have any questions.
All right, we'll move it to public comments. Anyone making it would like to make a public comment? All right, we'll bring it back to council. By the way, Jordan, thank you so much for allowing Curtis to be part of your presentation. It's nice to have a senior citizen add to that since they, yeah, the personal touch there. So I appreciate it. And I don't blame you. The size of our facilities and how big the town is that you've never had a chance to visit. So
I just stay in my corner, to be honest.
yeah, they work you too hard. You can't leave your office. I know. All right. Anyone have a comment or question? Go ahead. Mayor Pro Tem.
Just a couple of questions. Curtis, that kitchen at the senior center, that freezer, refrigerator freezer unit, would that require construction, or is there space for an additional unit, or do you redeem it with other changes? or
So staff is looking at all of those options right now. I'm not certain, we don't have the technical specs developed completely yet. We're underway looking at what options we have. Most of those are kind of, as I understand them, most of them are custom built for your general facility. So they'll come in, and there's probably standard sizes that they have, but generally speaking, I think that that would come out and be redone.
Thank you. Is there also was there a round 2 that we missed out on, or I saw round 1 and 3?
So round 2 was a little bit different, and the projects eligible wouldn't fit the timeline for the town, so we jumped to round 3.
Okay, thank you. Well, I know those improvements are certainly needed. Those things have been in place for a long time, so thank you.
Yeah, Jordan, do you recollect the completion timeline? Is it December of 2021, or is it 2020?
No, it will be April 2022 would be when the project should be completed.
Councilmember Lombardo?
I think it's very nice that we have the opportunity to use these funds, and I think it's a worthy project. It's time to update, and it's been made apparent by the need for our senior meals to be increased due to COVID, the use of the kitchen, that sort of thing. It's a good way to bring the community together, and I think it's a worthy project. I'd like to see it happen. So I would like to move it if there's no further conversation.
All right. We have a motion. Is there any other comments or a second?
I'd be glad to second the item.
Councilmembers Dennison,
Yes.
Droz,
Yes.
Lombardo,
Yes.
Schooler,
Yes.
and Mayor Abel.
Yes. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 6, Parsack update.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This evening, I wanted to provide you with a brief update regarding Parsack, soon to be CIRA. Just as a reminder, it was brought forth to Council a few months ago that they are doing a merger, so it's now going to be called California Intergovernmental Risk Authority, and I've got to get used to saying that, so after Parsack for so long. The steps for the merger are going very well. In preparation for the expanding pool, staff is working on some additional resources to provide to its members. So one of them that I wanted to highlight is called the Rent a Risk Manager Program. And so a representative from CIRA would visit each member agency and do an assessment such as safety inspections, review of contracts, ergonomic assessments, those kinds of things, and provide recommendations to those respective agencies for any improvements that they might want to look into. So there was a similar program that Parsack had offered before, but it was conducted every 3 to 5 years. This is going to be annually. So that way, it's going to help protect the assets of each individual member as well as the pool in its entirety. So the next item I wanted to touch on was insurance premiums. So I'll start with the good news. In the workers' comp area, over the last 3 years, premiums have decreased due to all the members doing a very good job mitigating in workers' comp injuries and providing a safe working environment. And this year, we will see a 6% decrease from our previous fiscal year premium, so that's a good thing. On the other side of the spectrum is general liability and excess liability, and unfortunately, not only within our pool, but it's a trend across all pools, that because of increased claims, that has increased significantly. So hopefully, things will change. The staff at Parsack CIRA has been monitoring that over the last few years and are looking at other options for different carriers just to make sure that it's cost effective for all its members. To end on a positive note, there is a new member that is going to be joining CIRA starting July 1st, the city of Sierra Madre. So if people know where that's at, it's kind of tucked in between Arcadia and Monrovia, and after vetting and going through the due diligence, it's a good risk for the pool. So that concludes my very brief update. So I'd be happy to answer any questions following public comment.
Thank you. We'll move to public comment on Parsack. All right. We'll bring it back to the council. Any questions or comments? Motion to receive and file we don't need, but we're going to receive and file it. Go ahead.
Deb, can you explain the rise in the cost of the coverage for the insurance would have been regardless of whether we joined forces, and probably is better because of our joining forces.
Correct.
It's less.
It's just,
Well, it's
correct.
Not affecting us as much as it would have if we were on our own,
Right.
like we
Correct.
were earlier.
It's just a trend, again, across all pools with, dangerous condition claims, unfortunately, police liability claims, and those have just been really increased over, as you hear on the news, over the last.
So joining this new group has not increased our liability, and actually has probably been a good thing when we look back now, after having been a member since July, you say?
What's that?
How long, it was July or something that?
No, the merger will take effect on July 1st.
It's not fully taken effect?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
That's okay.
I thought it took effect when we talked about it last.
Nope, it goes into effect on July 1st this year.
All right, thank you.
Very good. All right, if there are no other questions, we'll receive and file the report on Parsack update. Thank you very much. Moving on to item number 7, budget report.
Hello again.
There we go. Okay, so before I begin the budget presentation, I would just like to remind the council, last time we did a budget review was year-end results, which ended better than expected, and then we moved forward into 2021 with kind of a conservative mindset to see what the next 6 months would hold. So I'm a little more excited to bring good news this time and walk you guys through the mid-year actual results and then some of the proposed changes that will affect the remainder of the fiscal year. There we go. All right. So for the mid-year summary, the town's mid-year budget review indicates projected year-end results are in line with the current amended budget, and there are some proposed amendments to align with additional revenues and expenditures. So for the mid-year actual results, the major general fund revenues are all trending at increased rates through mid-year 2021. The property tax revenues have increased slightly in comparison to prior year, with estimated increases to continue due to increased property values. The sales tax revenues have increased from prior year by $170,000. This is largely due to the newer online sales tax requirements that have increased revenues from online websites such as Amazon and Walmart.com. These online retailers' sales tax collections, they are remitted to the county, and then the town of Yucca Valley receives a percentage of that allocation. The franchise fee revenues are decreased slightly from prior year to date. However, with the implementation of the Burtec franchise fee agreement and the collection of trash disposal fees on the property tax assessments, we do expect a slight increase in those revenues. The largest and most notable increase for the town's revenues is the transient occupancy tax, which, as you'll see in the graphic here, has increased 200% from the current amended budget. So to review the TOT revenue trends, the revenue source has steadily increased over the past 10 years, with especially large increases beginning in 2018 with the implementation of the short-term vacation rental ordinance. With the development of easy-to-use applications such as Airbnb and VRBO, along with increased tourism to the desert area, the TOT revenues are expected to continue to trend upward through the end of the fiscal year. So just to note on this graphic, the green column is the total. The red column is the STVR receipt, so you'll see that they've more than doubled the traditional lodging TOT revenues. And then the blue line at the top is the Joshua Tree National Park visitation over the years. So you'll see that decline in 2020, and I would expect a similar result this year just based off of local traffic, but we'll see at the end of the year. So the remaining revenue sources have had varying levels of impact through mid-year. Interest revenues are still at decreased rates due to nationwide reductions during COVID-19. Another revenue source impacted by COVID-19 is the community services revenues, which continue to operate under the limitations of the current public health guidelines. The community development revenues have continued in an upward trend with a $285,000 increase from the prior fiscal year. This is largely due to increased encroachment permit fees due to the sewer project, along with those short-term vacation rental permit fees from the increased activity we just reviewed. So from the major revenue sources, you see property tax still remains the major source of revenues for the town, with sales tax right behind that. This year, community development revenues have increased to the point of being a major revenue source. However, in light of the implementation of Joshua Tree protections, this may decrease to prior year levels. So you'll see the remaining revenue sources there. Animal service revenues continue at steady rates due to the town's partnership with the county. There will be a renegotiation of that contract moving forward in 21-22. Expenditures for the general fund are trending in line with the current amended budget. All of them, to note, are under that 50% of expected expenditures by this mid-year report. Particular items to note of mid-year is the inclusion of the $627,000 payment to CalPERS for the pension stabilization reserve policy, which is to continue the town's strategy to fully fund the pension liability. Another item to note is the contract safety total of $1.6 million is less than the total contract safety billings year to date because the CARES Act allocation from the state and county assisted with reimbursement of about $300,000. The operating supplies and services remain in line with expected expenditure patterns. So you'll see those general fund expenditures trends. They report relative increases based off of necessary increases year to year. The comparison I would like you to note on this graphic is the decrease in contract safety costs that are depicted in this current fiscal year. This is due, besides the reimbursement from CARES, is also the increased allocation from Measure Y, which is subsidizing about $1.8 million of those contract safety costs. So you'll see here there's the actual contract safety cost for this year, which shows that 6% increase year to year that's currently being funded by Measure Y. So here are some of the proposed amendments based off of the review of the mid-year actual results. Along with the projections of revenue trends, there are 3 revenue sources recommended for increase through fiscal year 2021. These are relatively conservative estimates, and as revenues continue to be received since January, and even this last week of February, I can say that those total amounts will most likely be on the lower end of what's actually received. So the proposed increases of the fiscal year 2021 budgeted expenditures include appropriations for personnel services, operating supplies and services expected through the end of the fiscal year, and the budget appropriation of the pension stabilization payment. The total net impact to the general fund is an increase of $412,000. So here's the list of all of the proposed amendments to the general fund. Excuse me. The personnel service expenditures recommended include the 2.5% cost of living adjustment previously reviewed and approved for allocation by the town council at the previous year in review. In addition, it is recommended for an allocation for the COVID-19 disaster relief payments as the reimbursement to town staff for expenditures incurred through the current COVID-19 protocols. Staff estimated expenditures incurred from March 2020 through the end of fiscal year 2021 and expect these payments to be reimbursable through future federal state funding programs. The remaining expenditure increases reflect upcoming projects and professional services through the end of the current fiscal year. The total increase to general fund expenditures is $346,400. The town's reserve policy range is currently approved at 50 to 55% of the current fiscal year's appropriated expenditures. With the proposed budget amendments, the general fund's balance is projected at 64% of operating reserves. So for the special revenue fund budgets, there's a really long list in your agenda packet of a lot of different proposed amendments. So majority of those resulted from the completion and final reimbursement of prior year projects that were completed under budget. So the result of projects when they're completed under budget is the return of appropriated funding to their source fund. So 2 examples of those projects are the Outer Highway Sidewalk Project and the Yucca Valley Elementary Sidewalk Project. Both projects appropriated additional funding from Measure I to accommodate estimated costs to complete the project. The projects were completed under budget, and the funds can be returned to the Measure I fund. So that's what the majority of those transactions are. In addition to the fund transfer, the Capital Project Reserve Fund includes proposed allocations from the vehicle reserves to accommodate 2 town vehicle replacements, along with the budgetary allocation from reserves for the Town Hall Vehicle Number 3. And then finally, the Measure Y and Measure Z funds include proposed revenue increases based off of the mid-year actual results and projections through the end of the fiscal year. So just briefly, revenue measures Y and Z, these are the revenue trends since their inception. You'll see with an increase of the $500,000 proposed through fiscal year 2021 for a total of $2 million in annual revenues, the fund will most likely increase to prior year levels. So that concludes my presentation. The recommended actions include receiving and filing the mid-year budget report for fiscal year 2021, adopting the resolution amending the 2021 general fund and special revenue fund budgets as identified in Exhibit A and B, to approve the amendment to the 2021 salary schedule. I would like to note you've received a corrected copy, as well as for the public at the front. There was a calculation correction on the schedule, so you have that with you. And then to approve the COVID-19 disaster relief payment policy as identified in Exhibit D. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Move to public comments on the budget report for 6 months ending December 31st, 2020. Yes, please come forward. You'll have 3 minutes, Mr. Flint.
Take that long.
All right.
What is the pension liability amount for the town?
Sir, the net pension liability is $4.7 million as of June 30, 2020.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else with the public comment online or here in person? Do we have, we're monitoring online, right? Because I can't see the, so, no one? All right. Very good. We'll bring it back to the council. Questions? Yes. Councilmember Lombardo.
Once again, it's an awesome report. Sounds really positive. Overall, we're doing extremely well, and it speaks very well of the staff and management teams that are making it all happen. A lot of projects completed on time and under budget, and that goes a lot to our engineering department and planning very well. I think that it's extremely well done, and I'm very happy to see all that happening.
Councilmember Drodes?
I think it's incredible that, I mean, who would have thought a year ago, that we would be in this situation and things are better than we thought. And I just think that's great. And part of that is because people are wanting to get away from Los Angeles and come up here. I think I heard on the radio today that the national park, Joshua Tree National Park, was the 10th most visited national park in the country. And that's pretty incredible. So that's why this is happening. I'm sure other cities and towns don't have the luxury of having a national park next to them. But thank you for the great report.
Thank you. Any other council member questions? I have a couple questions for you. First of all, do you know the expiration date of Measure Y? Because a lot of this funding that we're getting is because of the blessings of the community in passing those measures. Do we know when that will expire?
Curtis, can you remind me what that date is?
All right.
2026.
All right.
Yeah.
So 2026, and then, so that's something to take into consideration, because that has really changed the economic picture and been able to have us increase law enforcement and other things that have helped the community in a lot of ways. I had a question on the increase in the swimming pool. There was an increase in expenditures. Why are we needing more money for the pool?
From the department request, there was some deferred maintenance, so they were requesting a potential increase. There wasn't a specific that I have in my notes, but Shane might be able to provide that information.
Okay. I would just caution that we don't want to put a whole lot of monies into a pool that might be being replaced.
And we're coordinating with the school district on those types of repairs that may be classified as significant and upcoming. I think, as the mayor's indicated, we're in a transition period moving from the high school pool to the new Proposition 68 pool, and staff is doing everything they can to keep any capital expenditures as low as possible.
All right, very good. And then historically, Jordan, is it true that property taxes, the revenue generated from property taxes, is a little bit more stable indicator of future monies coming in?
Yes, the property tax revenue's majority is secured, so the town, it won't vary as much or as quickly as the other revenue sources would.
All right, and there's a better chance of property taxes going very high in a short period of time versus coming back down lower, right? Because it takes a while for reassessments of lowering property taxes when we have a massive turnover of property right now, a lot of people buying.
Correct. So included in that property tax revenue are other items such as like the document transfer tax. So we've seen a really large increase in that because of all of the home sales. So that particular item within those property tax revenues has increased rapidly this year.
Okay, very good. Thank you. All right, if there are, yes, go right ahead.
On the transit occupancy tax, what is our percentage in relationship to the communities around us? Are we average?
The tax rate
below?
or the amount that, the tax rate is 7%, which is significantly lower than the majority of those surrounding. I believe the low desert is 10 to 12%, so we're aligned with the county at 7%.
And far as revenues brought in from the TOT, are we on par with 29 Palms and?
I haven't looked at a comparison in the surrounding areas, so I wouldn't be able to answer that one clearly.
And I know that the county has to be seeing a big increase in their revenues as well because of the vacation rental numbers. And as Councilmember Rhodes mentioned, we're getting a double benefit in a lot of ways from that, because not only are we seeing property values go up, but we're also seeing people stay longer and more days throughout the year, and they're spending money at the stores and filling up with gas, and they're staying here locally versus just traveling through. So
Question.
It's very good. Yes?
Is the TOT tax usable to help mitigate some of the problems that we might experience with Airbnb and that sort of thing, like code enforcement, that sort of thing?
So first, like a specific allocation from TOT, I wouldn't be able, Curtis might be able to give you a better answer.
I believe it goes into the general fund?
Yeah, it's flexible funding. So it can be used to identify any potential priorities that the council may establish.
So potentially, if we were wanting to put money towards monitoring the Airbnb so it's not a community problem, and I would assume more code enforcement kind of thing, we would be able to draw money from expected revenues from Airbnb.
Sure.
To help that. Okay. Thank you.
And again, I would say that to be cautionary about that, unless we reevaluate our lower than average rate. So if we did an increase in revenue through increase of TOT tax, then possibly the benefit of that would be to be able to add people to monitor the vacation rental business and so forth. Because it does fluctuate. So TOT tax is one way of generating some revenue. All right. So I need a motion if there are no other questions or comments.
I'll move that we approve the recommendation for the budget report, 6 months ending in December 31st, 2020.
Very good.
I'll
And
second the item.
as presented, all right, and we have a second from Councilmember Dennison.
Councilmember Dennison.
Yes.
Droz,
Yes.
Lombardo.
Yes.
Schooler,
Yes.
and Mayor Abel.
Yes. Very good. We'll move on to Department Report number 8. Debt Management Policy Review.
All right, this is the most exciting item of the evening, I'm sure. So actually, this is just a conversation, and I think you'll get the gist of it as we move through it. In your agenda packet, we included the council's already approved debt management policy. We're going to use that kind of as the launching point for our discussion this evening on what that means to the town in terms of future activities. And so let's just start with the summary. We're going to receive and file the background on the existing debt policy, but more specifically, talk a little bit about the future public facility financing needs that the town may have and how that has changed over time. So, as you know, the town has a number of guiding documents that we use for various purposes. We'll let this get back to not me. There we go, almost. All right. We have, as you know, your strategic plan that you develop every couple of years. We'd call that a kind of a midterm plan. You have your capital improvement plan that identifies your capital projects both in the near term, midterm, and long term, both funded and unfunded. So that's more of a long-term planning document. Debt management policy outlines when it's appropriate to use debt as a community or as a town. Capital financing, we'll talk about that tonight, and then your annual budget, and that's really more of a short-term implementing type of documents. All of these are very important and play different roles. We're going to talk about debt management policy tonight and what that means. Excuse me. So what is debt management policy? It really just talks about when is it appropriate for a community to use debt. Sometimes folks get the misnomer that debt is bad and you should never use debt. And while if you had unlimited resources like the federal government, then yeah, maybe you don't need to worry about debt. That's not the case with the town, and so you do have to be concerned. You have to be aware and intentional in what your planning is. And there are a number of reasons why you might want to consider debt as a tool to help you finance potential capital needs. So your debt management policy establishes the conditions for the use of debt. It highlights when is it appropriate, is it affordable, how do you minimize interest rates that you might have to pay, how do you minimize issuance costs, how do you maintain your financial flexibility. All of these things are already incorporated into your existing debt management policy. So let's talk a little bit about when might it be appropriate to use debt if you're not able to have unlimited resources. Well, your debt policy outlines kind of some of the criteria that you'd want to consider. Number one is a project that you're doing, is it necessary? Do you have to have it? Another rationale might be, is that facility or is that asset going to be used for many years? In other words, you probably wouldn't want to issue debt if it's going to be an operating expense that's every year you're going to have to pay. That doesn't make any sense. Another option would be, or another criteria might be, does the asset serve multiple generations? So a good example of this would be your Prop 68 project, although that's not going to be debt financed per se for the most part. But like a senior center that's going to have, or a public facility that's going to have a 40 or 50 or 60-year life cycle. So the concept is, do you want your existing taxpayer to write a check out of your reserves to pay for, say, for example, senior center improvements, and then thereby remove all of the resources, your current resources that you might otherwise want to spend on road improvements, community quality of life you're basically taking all of that and putting it into one project. Does that make sense? Where that facility will serve generations upon generations. And so that's really kind of the idea of, yeah, maybe debt is the appropriate tool so that you're spreading it out. They call it intergenerational equity. So you're spreading it out over across time. Obviously, the debt should not exceed the useful life of the asset. You don't want to be paying debt. It's like buying a car, right? You don't want to pay car payments after the value of the car is no longer very high. So you want to make sure that that asset is something that's going to be around for a long time. And then obviously, anytime you're considering debt, you want to make sure that your ability to service or pay for that debt is not going to constrain the operations of the organization. So let's take that from a theoretical to some sample projects here. You have a handful of them that the council's aware of that we're moving forward. You have your Prop 68 project, the Tri-Valley project, the Brem Park completion, town services consolidation. Now that the library's gone, you have that space there that can be used to consolidate services. We've talked about senior center modernization or your old town event space. You add some project costs to that, and pretty soon you're able to come up with a total project budget. Now some of that, as you know, the Prop 68 project is fully funded through grant funding. Some of these others may or may not be. So you take your total projects and then you have your less funded projects, and all of a sudden you can identify what is your gap to be able to move these projects forward. And does it make sense to use debt for them? Well, there's a couple of ways that you can get those projects delivered. One is pay as you go, and that's basically writing a check out of your current resources. Another is grants or short-term loans, and then finally debt financing. Pay as you go, we have used extensively for the town and is the primary way that we have funded activities almost exclusively from incorporation forward. So this includes your street improvements from Measure I, from Measure Y, from the general fund, things like your library, although that had some RDA funding, some of that was paid out of your capital reserves. Deferred maintenance, projects like your Welcome Center improvements, you paid for those out of reserves immediately. You also have used extensively grants and short-term loans. Examples include your Prop 68 allocation for the Recreation Center, CDBG that we talked about earlier tonight, or other improvements like Paradise Park that was improved that include grants and short-term loans. So those are ones that the town has used primarily. Debt financing has not been used really much at all. I think we have two examples that I can remember outside of RDA. We had the purchase of the community development building back in the mid-90s was done through some debt. And then we have a small debt financing arrangement with the county for the animal shelter. So it's really about the only debt that you have. So you think back about when can debt be issued, and we already talked about these are some of the criteria. So you think of if you're not going to use debt, in other words, if you only do pay as you go, and you have the opportunity to get projects done, if you're not going to be able to fund them, then sometimes they're going to sit. So for example, if you didn't want to use current resources to do your town service consolidation project, even though the building's empty and it makes sense to do it now, if you don't have the resources, then that project just gets put on the back burner and it doesn't move forward. And that's probably not in the best interest of the community either. So you'd go back and say, well, is the project necessary? Is it going to serve folks for a long time? Can we afford it? Does it make sense to do it at a certain given time? And if the answer is yes, then we can look at debt financing as a tool to use. Couple of quick notes on the town's strengths. When we talk about if you're going to enter into the market, is it a good time to do it? Is the organization prepared to do it? The town right now is in a fantastic shape. You have minimal long-term facility debt that we already mentioned. Jordan talked about the balance sheet as you have both your year-end results from fiscal year 20 as well as what we're projecting for 2021. Extremely strong balance sheet, stronger than it's been ever in the history of the town. and that would likely result in a strong credit rating, which you'll see some benefits to that in just a minute. Secondly, you would look at the interest rate market. Does it make sense to use debt right now as a tool? And by all measures, it is a good time to be doing that if you're going to have to use debt. So interest rate is, the interest rate environment is very favorable. You'll see that. There continues to be strong demand for municipal issuance. And then as inflation pushes up, then tax-advantaged issuances like the town might be able to use makes sense for a lot of investors. That ends up keeping the rates down. As an example of that, a couple of quick pictures here showing you historical graphic of rates. So the rates there on the left-hand side, starting even as recent as 2012. These are for 20-year issuances. They have the high, average, and low. So you can see even as recent as 2013-14, debt issuance was around 5%. 2021 right now is some of the lowest rates that we've seen in a very, very long time. This is looking back a little bit further. This is or actually a little bit shorter time frame. Just that drop from 2019 to February of 2021. You can see that rate where we're at now. If you go back further and you want to look at historical from the 1970s, you can see where we're at today relative to the last, I guess that's 50 years. So you're basically at historical lows for any type of debt financing, even with a little bit of a bump in the last couple of weeks. And then lastly, this just shows you the value of being a strong credit that we talked about. So I think when we did our last issuance as a redevelopment agency, we were I think a BBB credit. I would expect that we would be improved from that today, and you can see that's the spread there between your different credit grades for the issuance. So by all measures, very, very inexpensive relative to historical terms. So where do we go from here this evening? This is really just an introductory concept discussion for the council. We're not in any point or place yet to bring you any specific proposals. We're going to continue to develop our budgets. We're going to continue to look at what our projects are. And we'll bring those projects back to the council for your input, for your prioritization of which ones you want to see moving forward and how fast you want them to move forward. And then based on that information, we would develop what financing options look attractive, what might be recommended for the council and the community to consider. And then internally, there's steps that we can take to ensure that we have the team assembled, the pieces in place so that if and when we're ready to go to market, that process is able to move forward pretty seamlessly. So with that, the recommendation again, just to receive and file the discussion this evening, provide input as the council desires, and happy to answer questions after public comment.
Thank you. We'll move it to public comment. Anyone wishing to make a comment on tonight's presentation of debt management policy review? All right. Seeing and hearing none, we'll bring it back to the council. I had a couple questions for you. First of all, you gave an example of multi-projects. So you could possibly fund a bond and cover a multitude of different projects, not just each project gets a separate debt.
Yeah, I think there's, you'd have flexibility in how you structure that, for sure.
Okay, so you could do multiple projects with just one bond, perhaps?
Yeah, we didn't go into the types of financing that you have, and I think it would depend, but generally speaking, if they're in the bucket of public improvement, public facility improvements, you can, for example, on I believe on a lease purchase arrangement, you would be able to bundle certain public facility projects together.
Okay, and then could it be used to also to perhaps pay off current debt that we have?
Well, there's really not that much. I don't think there's any debt that we would pay off. We have the one with the county, but that's an arrangement that is advantageous for us, so we would just leave that.
Okay, and then it could be used for, could it be used if you did a partnership with other outside agencies? So, for example, we heard tonight about really the need for high-speed internet, and that would be beneficial to the town because more and more people might want to move here and live here and work from home, so that's an entire industry. It could help with the health district, because I've heard that they're needing more and more people to be able to be online for health services, that you can have doctor visits over the computer. It could help the community college, which we heard from the president, as well as the school district, which is having problems reaching students via online because of the lack of internet. So could it be a debt that was in joint partnership with other agencies, or could they take, would they be separated as far as their use of funds?
Yeah, I mean, you could always do, generally what happens is if you're going to have combined debt or if it's going to benefit multiple people, then you enter into like a JPA and you would establish it that way. On a project like that, I think it would be nuanced on whatever the characteristics of that project would be.
So you'd have to figure out a joint participation, an agency or something of joint people that might be able to then go after a bond.
Yeah, or if it made sense. So like, I mean, so for example, on your hypothetical of broadband internet, I mean, if the town wanted to establish it, you could do the project and then base the financing on a potential revenue source, where you're then marketing out that broadband to other entities that they would enter into some kind of agreement that gives you revenue to pay for that project.
And it could be also used for large-scale road projects, any kind of project then, basically. Sure. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I like the idea about the very low interest rates at this particular time and benefiting our residents for years to come. But also, anytime you take on debt, you're also taking away revenue or opportunities for future councils because it has to be done within the budget. And if we're using future funds, then that sort of handcuffs some future councils. Councilmember Dennison.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that this is something that really fits in with some of the strategic planning we've been doing, our community outreach, and what services people in our community are looking for. And I think a lot of the things that we've been working on, staff has been working on and putting together shovel-ready projects that we know are a benefit already to the community. They are items that are needed. We spoke a couple of times about the senior center today. We saw images of its need for improvement, consolidation of our services, so we have a better workflow. And that's what it's all about efficiency. And I think we've got a really good track record. We've seen this in the community. The work that the staff and the crews and the entire town has been doing, that we remain very conservative with our budget. We do not throw money at items that are just a thought. These are things that are planned out, and some of these options that we have to move projects forward at this time, where bond rates are very low, the lowest I've ever seen them. I look at some of these projects as kind of like a house. You buy a home, you're going to live there for quite some time. Most people finance those items, and it's something that they take great pride in, and then at the end of the term, it remains valuable for that family, and this community is our family. So these are items to think about. It's just a good conversation, so I thank staff today for bringing it forward, talking to us about another option that we have to present to the community and see what direction we want to go. So I like the presentation. Thank you very much.
Mayor Pro Tem Schooler.
Just a comment or two. I think it's remarkable that we can even have this conversation and be looking at these kinds of opportunities. And I think it's a testament to staff for managing our funds so well. And also, you know, we're kind of at a perfect storm situation, it looks like, for completing these projects or addressing these projects. None of these are new. They're things we've talked about for a long time, and they're if they're going to be done, this looks like a really good time to approach that. So thank you for the report. It's really good to be having this conversation.
Very good. Anyone else? Yes, Member Lombardo.
I think all the projects that were mentioned on the slide there were all very worthy. I wish I could have seen the fire station up there, but I think we're getting, maybe we can charge rent, we can build it and charge rent to them, no. We'll still want to get the fire station sometime in the future, but that's not really a town thing, is it? County now. I think it's a good time to look at debt financing and that sort of thing because of the rates being so low, and it's an incredible opportunity, but we got to be cautious and prudent about where we go with it. So, looking forward to the discussions.
Very good. All right. So we'll receive and file, and thank you so much, staff, for the presentation. We'll move on to future agenda items. Anyone wishing to add an item for future consideration?
Mayor, I'd like to see if we could pursue this conversation about what might be able to be done on behalf of citizens that are facing this connection to the sewers and Joshua Tree issue. I'm not sure what the town can do, but I'd be interested in at least exploring that.
Yeah.
Do we have anyone else wishing to explore that possibility?
I do.
All right.
I think it's worth
All right.
exploring.
I believe that's, that situation is one of where the water district is the one in charge of the sewer and the wastewater treatment facilities and people hooking up, and I'm not sure what can be done, but perhaps staff can give us some type of a report or what the options are.
Let us mull on that.
Okay.
Figure out how to present that in a way that is realistic and doesn't obscure the facts that are being presented. So I just want to caution that, I mean, quite frankly, there's not a whole lot that the town is capable of doing depending on what the question is. So these regulations that you've heard in public comment tonight are related to state regulations. And that's one of the downsides of the town stepping up and attempting to assist our residents in being able to provide them a path forward in terms of dealing with, for example, the Western Joshua Tree issue. So now, because the town's involved, then the town council hears some of those concerns, and rightfully so. We don't dismiss that at all at the frustration of the homeowner, for sure. We understand that. So let us think about that, and then if nothing else, it will at least be an agendized, we can do an agendized update on our conversations with with the state, what some of those frustrations are, and possibly have some alternative action for the council in written communication back to the department.
Well, perhaps we can look into asking the Department of Fish and Game to set aside a certain amount of monies from all the fees that they're collecting for those that could qualify through them on some type of relief. The situation that was brought to us tonight is quite unique, and perhaps they can set aside some funding for those people that are most impacted and don't have the financial resources to comply with their regulations. So maybe that's what we could possibly do. But I understand you'll have to mull that one over and get back to us, okay?
Those rules that have changed are just while they're studying this, and we don't, and that's only supposed to be a 1 to 2 year type of procedure. So
the current regulation is 12 months, and then it may be extended beyond that, I think 18 months.
okay.
Likely that would be followed up by
it won't have a
something else.
decision in 12 months. It may be
All
extended.
right.
They should.
And we can't go into any further detail because it's not on the agenda, but thank you. So staff perhaps, are you okay with that, council member, or Mayor Pro Tem? The staff sort of look into it and get back to you? All right. All right, sounds good. All right, if there's any others? I don't know, I like seeing staff squirm a little bit with our requests. All right, we'll move on to public comments. I gave you an opportunity to leave early, at the beginning of this meeting, and you two gentlemen didn't take me up on it. So I'm going to also extend an offering that you normally only get one opportunity for public comments. So if there's anyone still here that's put in the time, I'm going to offer an additional amount of time if you have any other additional public comments that are different than the one you've already brought forward. So this time we open up for 3 minutes of public comments per person. Is there anyone wishing to make a public comment? Very good.
I am.
All right, very good. We'll go to you in just a moment, all right? Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
A long walk.
All right, introduce your name for everyone that's online can't see you, so.
Sure. Tyler Folks, resident, Town Yucca Valley.
Uh-huh.
I know broadband had been mentioned just briefly as a reference point for with the debt conversation. If you guys are interested, the California Advanced Services Fund through the Public Utilities Commission has a pretty good intuitive database as well as a GIS system you can use for reference for grants coming from the state for broadband infrastructure. It's quite useful, as well as Spectrum as a local ISP. They'll also meet with town staff and discuss their plans as they apply for CASF funds through the state. So that might be something worth looking into. It's a very helpful resource that I found. And the state also released a broadband master plan at the start of this year, which encompasses their plans for integrating broadband across the state, because that's going to be a major initiative for them. So that might be worth looking into. Just one final note, kind of touching on what I mentioned before. It's a rather grim statistic, but 22 of our veterans commit suicide per day, according to the VA. So our meeting's gone for an hour and 37 minutes. So it's likely that just over the course of this discussion today, at least one veteran's committed suicide during this discussion. So the program I mentioned earlier, be local funds spent on local residents within local businesses. So I think it meets some of the things we're trying to achieve with our nonprofits and our business grants that we've given during COVID. So I hope it's worthy of consideration. And on a final note, I just want to say thank you guys. Working in local government, I realize it's very rare, if ever, that someone comes and says thank you. Normally people only come to a meeting to express discontent with something. So I just wanted to express as a resident, I appreciate all the time that the town council has put in, as well as staff and your efforts. It definitely is appreciated and it doesn't go unnoticed. So I thank you for the time to speak, and I hope everyone has a great night. And also, if anyone wants my contact information to follow up on anything I mentioned today in regards to the program, the staff has my contact information as well, so I appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Very good. Anyone else within the room that would like to make a public comment? All right, we'll move to online. Yes. And I'm sorry, I can't see names, so you're on. Go ahead, you have 3 minutes. All right.
This is Deborah, hello. Okay, first of all, I've lived here for almost 4 years, and in reference to the sewer project, was still an extra expense without the Joshua Tree being approved by the CFW originally. Now, I know there's a little more expense now. They have to be careful with the trees, which I'm happy about. But there was an expense originally, and I want to put a question to the town council. Could we have negotiated the grants better a little bit originally, or something like that, to help people out who can't financially afford this very well? I feel like when you're making these comments, you're trying to put it all on the Joshua Tree. But when I came here, there was already a lot of expense associated with it. Now, I know there were grants, and I appreciate that. But some people felt like some of those could have been negotiated better. So I'm not really sure about that, but maybe we could go back, look for some more grants. I personally don't mind, making sure that we could help people in any way that we could that need the money, and they need maybe some help with this. But I don't like reference to the trees, like to the Joshua trees. It's like it's all the fault of the Joshua trees. I think that's just wrong. They weren't protected, the plant codes weren't enforced, and maybe had that happened, this wouldn't have went down. So I just want to make a comment on that so people are a little more educated. That's really all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we did do some, the Measure Y and Z did help lower the cost to the residents of hooking up and maintaining the sewer project. So it would have been a lot more expensive to the residents had Measure Y and Z not passed. So yes, the town did participate in helping keep those costs down. But I appreciate your comments. Anyone else online or in the room that would like to make a comment? Wonderful. Well, thank you. That was very productive. I appreciate everyone's public comments tonight. We'll move on to staff reports and comments.
Staff, any comments? Okay, just a couple, Mayor and Council. So, as you know, the federal government continues to work on the stimulus plan that the President is advocating for. So we're keeping our eyes on Washington, see what ends up coming out of there. This is the one package that likely will include something for local governments, the other one directly for local governments, the others have not. So we'll keep you apprised as that moves forward. The budget information that's coming out of Sacramento seems to indicate something similar to what you heard tonight with ours, in that the state is doing very well. There's no current grab coming for local government revenues, so that's always encouraging. We'll keep you posted on that. Wanted to give you an update on the, we had a couple of folks calling and asking about the town's involvement in rodeo and the potential for rodeo. Generally speaking, and I'm going to have Jessica, if you could bring up that one graphic here, we'll talk about that. But with respect to the regulations that are currently in place on the town and our inability to have large gatherings, we don't feel that we're able to commit at this point to that. So we've let those folks know that likely we will not be involved in the rodeo this year. It's just not going to work out this based on current regulations. Go ahead and scroll down to the bottom of this one. Yeah, okay, there's a tab right there. If you can click on CDPH monitoring, right where your arrow's at, just to the right of that. Up, yeah, that one right there. All right, this is the current positivity rates as well as the Healthy Places Index. This is what the state looks with respect to the county before they identify what tier you're going into. Remember, we're currently, San Bernardino County is currently in the purple tier. Purple tier means we can't have indoor dining and some of the other restrictions. You'll be wondering why, because we have already gone through the red tier and are headed toward the orange tier. You'll recollect that when you go from tier to tier, you have to be in that metric for 14 days before you can be reclassed. And so while we're already almost into the orange tier, we'll be moving into the red tier, which is a loosening of restrictions that's anticipated either next week or possibly the following week, but we believe it'll probably be next week sometime that San Bernardino County will be in that next tier, which will allow for at least 25% capacity on your indoor dining, and some of the other restrictions will be loosened. So along those lines, county is moving forward with establishing a vaccination clinic here for select seniors that are in their programming in Yucca Valley. That is currently scheduled for the first shot vaccination on March 12th, followed up on April 2nd and that's going to be either at our senior center or here in the Yucca room, as the case may be. I think that's it, Mayor. Thank you for your time.
Very good. I understand that Cathedral City has a measure going forward with vacation rentals. So I guess we'll monitor that closely and see how that's received by the public down there and what they're proposing to do. But thank you, staff. I appreciate it. All right, we'll move on to Mayor and Council Member reports and comments. Council Member Dennison.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to thank President Otten for coming out and giving me an update, or giving us an update on CMC, but I really was interested in what he had to say. I started using the local college at the time, which was a branch of COD, back in 1981. And at that time, the classes were held at the high school. Later, classes were held on the Marine Corps base. They were all over the place, wherever they could find a facility to have the classes. And we've come a long way. We have a beautiful college up here. I'm glad that he's being creative and embracing virtual training and classes available. So, and then also some of the other ones, one that caught my ear was the firefighter classes that they have for wildland firefighting. But I've always had a great appreciation for public safety, so I think those are great for our community, and we always have a need for that. We have a good relationship with our public safety partners. They keep us updated. They make our community feel like everything's running smooth, and it is. You know, but that's not without their hard work and their sacrifice and battling every day. You know, some of the restrictions they have for social distancing when you're asking them to come directly and help you. So those are things they deal with all the time. They have had exposure problems in both areas of law enforcement and fire and EMS. So thank you to all your crews for sticking out there and keeping our community safe. I wanted to say something about the public comments today. You know, one thing about public comments that came earlier, and every single comment was about helping someone else. And I really appreciate that. We had comments that came out here and talked about how they could help their neighbors, how they could help those that have maybe some conditions with PTSD or whatever it is. Those things really help a lot. And we also had one doing more reach out so we be more diverse. So public comments are appreciated in those realms. We don't always hear things where every single thing was about someone else besides us or them. So thank you for that. That's all I have for today. Oh, one more thing though. Yeah, Yucca Trail is amazing. If you build it, they will come. The throughput on that road in just the last 2 days, I don't know if we're going to do a traffic count, but it's exponentially grown. The signal has been activated today and it's working. The center turn pockets are in. I don't know how many of you use Yucca Trail, but the community has been obviously needing that and waiting for it, because today that relieved our highway. It really did. I drove the highway and drove Yucca Trail 3 times, I think, today, and noticed a huge difference. And Yucca Trail just flowed right along. So thank you for all the hard work. You know, the planning, this has been a multi-year plan. Once again, strategic planning of what the community wanted. Staff and the crews, everyone was out there making it happen. You know, everybody in here helped that thing get funded. They helped move it through, and it looks really nice. So I just want to thank all of you for making it happen, our whole community.
Thank you. Councilmember Droz.
Yes, there are so many incredible things going on in our community. I think it's really great, and I really appreciate the presentation from Dr. Otten and the Pledge of Allegiance from Joseph, the president of the Student Council, or vice president. But I do want to say, because I work at the college, every instructor had to go through training to learn how to teach online. I mean, that's an incredible task. Last summer, everyone had to go through a very strict course and how to use Canvas and how to upload videos and how to teach your class online. So I think it's really incredible, and it's all because of Dr. Otten's leadership. And also, I want to mention Jordan. Jordan, you've done so many presentations lately. I can't think of a week in the last, or a meeting in the last couple months you haven't presented. So thank you for all your hard work. And staff, of course, and everybody. So have a great weekend. And don't forget to go to BMX. And don't forget that youth tennis is still an outdoor sport that young folks can sign up for. And if you want information, you can just email me. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Lombardo.
What else can be said about the staff and the great position that everybody's hard work has put this town in? And I think it's a nice comment when the presenters that come to talk to the council do have things to say. Hey, I've got a project that's going to help my neighbor. I think it speaks a lot to our community and why it's such a special place. And highly encourage people to get involved in the local community and come up with ideas like that and help us understand how we can best serve the community. I think there's a lot of great projects that have happened and are completing. We saw a list of things we want to get done in the future, I think there's so much to be positive about in Yucca Valley that we should all be very proud to be members of this community. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Schooler.
Well, I too would like to thank Dr. Otten for coming out and making his presentation. The college is such a resource to the community, and even now with their vaccine center out there. But really appreciate his energy and his connection to the community and the insights that he gave us this evening. And also thank you to Tyler Folks for his interest in this project and this proposal. It's a subject that's near and dear to my heart, and just thank you for taking that step and coming and talking to us about that. That's all I have.
Very good, thank you. I hopefully, Councilmember Lombardo, you won't be on the couch this week, not listening to your wife, but if so, we have a guest bedroom if you need it. I have no other comments tonight. We appreciate everyone's attendance and those public comments that were made. Appreciate the president of our fine college being here and presenting tonight. You can tell his love and appreciation of our community spirit and the college that was built because and by the community. Our next regular meeting for the Yucca Valley Town Council will be held on Tuesday, March 16th at 6 p.m. in the Yucca Valley Community Center room. We will call this, or the Yucca room, we'll call this an evening. Thank you.